So I have been spending a lot of time with budget gaming mice as of late. And well, today we have another one. But honestly, this one doesn't feel like a budget gaming mouse at all. It just feels like a really, really good gaming mouse. Let's take a look at the Razer Viper Mini. Alright, so first of all, the Viper Mini retails for $39.99, and in the box you're going to find two things: the Viper Mini and Razer's typical documentation. If you've taken a look at the original Viper or the Viper Ultimate, the Viper Mini has a nearly identical design. The biggest differences here are going to be that the Viper Mini is smaller. Well, of course, it's the mini version. It loses the rubber coated sides that the other two have, and it's now considered a faux ambidextrous design. So what that means is that instead of having side buttons on both sides like the bigger brothers, this one only has side buttons on the left side. So it's actually made for right-handed users. And so even though lefties could technically use this mouse comfortably, they won't be able to fully utilize all of the features within this mouse. Looking at dimensions, the Viper Mini measures in at about 118 millimeters long. It's 38 millimeters tall, and then when you look at the grip width, it's about 53.5 millimeters wide. This is also while just weighing in at 60 grams on my scale. So not only is this thing pretty small, but it's also super light as well. And I can tell you right now, I actually didn't think I was going to enjoy the size and shape of this mouse when I first got it. But after using it for a while, I was completely wrong. I love the feel of this mouse in hand, and not only that, but this thing is built like a tank. Like, being 60 grams, you would expect this thing to like flex or bow or just not be as sturdy as it is. But I'm telling you right now, this mouse is absolutely crazy sturdy. If you break this mouse, you have seriously done something wrong. Now I'm gonna stop right here for a second and mention that I can basically only use this mouse in a fingertip grip. I can kind of use like a claw grip, but I can, majority of the time, it's basically a fingertip grip for me, which is not my typical grip preference. But as I mentioned before, it does feel really good in hand. And that's with me having slightly larger hands according to Razer's hand chart. So if you have larger hands, keep in mind a fingertip grip might be forced upon you. But honestly, that is okay. You'll probably end up enjoying it anyway, even if that's not your preferred playstyle. If you have medium to small hands, I think you guys are the target audience for this mouse. Like, the size and everything was made for you guys, regardless of which is your preferred grip style. Now, as I said before, this mouse has a faux ambidextrous design that is nearly identical to its bigger brothers. The majority of the mouse has a matte finish with some glossy accents here and there, and towards the back of the mouse, you'll find the mouse's RGB. Razer split the RGB lighting up into its typical RGB logo, and then also added a really nice looking underglow. And if you've watched any of my previous mouse reviews, you probably already know that I'm not the biggest fan of RGB on mice. I kind of find it like useless because your hand's covering it anyway, so why actually add it to the mouse? But in general, I do think Razer did a great job with the underglow and the RGB on this mouse. On the bottom of this mouse, you're gonna find that RGB underglow I just mentioned a moment ago, and two 100% PFTE skates. Each skate spans the entire width of the mouse, and then you also have this little weird plastic skate that surrounds the sensor. And the plastic skate didn't cause any issues for me during my testing, but it would have been super nice to see them put another skate here. I mean, it's gonna cost them like an additional like 5 cents to do that, and then, you know, the scratching or anything like that you might get is absolutely gone. In any case, these skates on this mouse are absolutely incredible, especially when you consider the fact that they are stock skates. And I've actually never really been too picky on my mouse skates at all. But now, after using this guy for the past few weeks, my mind has certainly been changed, and I'm probably gonna go out and invest in some nicer mouse pads as well as some nice mouse skates for the mice that I use day to day. As for the cable, you'll find Razer's Speed Flex cable. Now, this cable is a lot better than the standard rubber cables we typically find on budget gaming mice. But I will say that it is kind of stiff, but I barely noticed the cable at all while gaming, so it's, you know, it's not that big deal. It didn't cause any any major drag, and it feels almost like the mouse is wireless. Oh, and not to mention, like, you know, it actually looks really good too. The left and right click buttons utilize Razer's 50mm optical switches, and for being optical switches, they feel super nice. They are nice and crisp. And although they aren't as crisp as like the mechanical switches you'll find on something like the G305 or the G502, it's nice to see Razer narrow the gap between their optical switches they've been developing and standard mechanical ones. The two side buttons on this mouse flare out just a smidge, and they feel pretty good to me. I'd say they are just a bit worse than something like the G305, which if you watched my review of that mouse, you would know I love those side buttons. They do feel like they kind of stick a little if I'm rapidly pressing them, but I don't have a lot of games that I play that I need to do that, so I don't think that's a big deal for me. Moving to the scroll wheel, we find that it has a nice rubber coating that makes it pretty easy to scroll with. Downside here is that scrolling feels just okay at best. The tactile feedback is lackluster and it leaves much to be desired. As for the click, it's fine, but again, I think it could be a little bit better. But looking at the actual price point of this mouse, I don't think we can really complain about it. I think it's perfectly acceptable for a scroll wheel. The last button we find on this mouse is the Dpi button, which is located just behind the scroll wheel. It doesn't feel all that great, but it's good enough for its purpose. By default, there are going to be 5 DPI settings you can cycle through, and they're going to be 400 DPI, 800, 1600, 3200, and 6400. This, of course, can basically be modified to your heart's content in the Synapse software. Speaking of the Synapse software, it's quite cluttered, but gets the job done. On it, you can customize your buttons to do just about whatever you want, modify DPI and polling rates, as well as change your mouse's RGB lighting. What's also nice is that once you set the profile in the software, you can close the software or even uninstall it, and your settings will persist on the onboard memory of the mouse. This is important to me because I hate having all these extra programs running in the backgrounds, especially when you have all these different RGB devices. You know, you have you have a different keyboard, different mouse, you have RGB for your motherboard, this and that. I hate having all these programs going, so you can just close out of it and once you get everything set up and you're good to go. Moving on to performance, well, this thing is absolutely stunning and I had a blast playing with it. The Viper Mini is equipped with the PMW3359 sensor. This sensor caps out at a DPI of 8500, has a maximum speed of 300 and max acceleration of 35. And I don't really see any of these numbers being a bottleneck for those of you who decide to pick it up. Now, my one issue with the performance of this mouse comes back down to size. My hand did end up cramping up a little bit after gaming, and I found that I had to take more frequent breaks while using this mouse. I can only guess that it's due to the size of the mouse and the grip I applied while playing intense games. While doing productivity work or just surfing the web, I had no issues whatsoever with this mouse. And so for a $40 mouse, I think the Viper Mini really hits the competition hard, like really, really hard. It has great performance, a premium build quality and look. The buttons are pretty solid. The stock skates are amazing. And honestly, I could probably go on and on and on about how well Razer stacked this mouse and how much I enjoyed it. The biggest downside here is going to be the size of this mouse. It's super small, and so it's going to appeal more to those who have small to medium-sized hands. And nothing's really wrong with that. That's the audience Razer was targeting with this mouse. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tech content just like this. If you want to check out my other mouse reviews, I'll have a playlist pop up somewhere on this screen right now, and I'll also have a link to it in the description box below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.